Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials as well as give a lot of baking business tips. So if you're anything like me, then you're going to have a lot of cake tops left over. Now, when I was running my at-home baking business, and even now, I really do not like the idea of waste. I want to try and conserve as much as possible. Now, there are a multitude of ways to actually conserve your products. This is one of my favorites though. You can make these into cake jars. You can also make mini cakes out of your scraps, but I really like doing it this way because when I make cake pops, I find that they last for a really long time. And when I was doing orders, it was one of those things that people did order often, so I was able to just kind of whip it out and have it on hand. When I talk about stock orders versus custom orders, this is the epitome of what I mean about having a stock order on hand. So something that you can continually have and that you always make. What's great was that I could offer my standard cake pops at a little bit of a lower price because they were a stock order, but it's also a bit of a hybrid because I could offer these as custom as well. The only thing that they wouldn't get to customize is obviously the flavor. For these, I kept them fairly neutral. Now, the thing with cake pops is there's no specific recipe. It really relies on how dry your cake is when you actually make the cake pop and what type of fillings or frostings that you decide to use. Now, here I'm using some leftover Italian meringue buttercream, which I will warn you right now, sometimes if you use buttercreams, this can leak oil from your cake pops. It doesn't always happen, and especially because I'm using such a small amount, I most likely won't have issue. But if you've noticed in the past that your cake pops leak a little bit of oil, it's usually due to the fact that you're using buttercream in this. So later on, I am actually going to use a different filling. So how do I know when the actual batter, I'm going to call it, itself is ready? Well, your cake ball can form really easily. That's how you know it's ready. If it can form easily and smoothly without any cracks and crevices, you're good to go. Now, the other way that you can do this, if you're not into sitting there rolling balls over and over, is you can press these into ready-made molds. And I really love this option. Now, I will say this cake mold that I'm using is actually pretty large, and this would probably produce kind of like a mini cake. So if you want to, though, you can get smaller molds and make really adorable cake pops that are in different shapes. And of course, we have our Cakesicles, which became super popular in the last couple years. And these are great because they're small enough so that people can consume a whole Cakesicle by themselves in one sitting. Now, I have very limited freezer space, so there's a specific process that I go through to make sure that I'm freezing things in the appropriate order and making sure that in the end, all of these products end up frozen. So I'm here rolling these out, and I do want to go back and talk about texture just a little bit more. When you're rolling these to get them nice and smooth, you actually need to apply quite a bit of pressure when you're rolling. And then after you feel that it has formed a ball, you can kind of ease off on the pressure and just kind of mold it with the palms of your hands. I know it sounds a little bit silly that I'm explaining how to roll these, but when I first started making cake pops, all of them kind of turned out a little bit oblong and wouldn't be nice and smooth on the outside, resulting in cracked chocolate or crevices in my chocolate once I dipped them. And to get these all fairly uniform in size, I am using an ice cream scoop. Really important that you level off that ice cream scoop every single time. Now, I'm putting this into the fridge first. I'm not going to place this in the freezer, mainly because I don't have space in my freezer. If you have room in your freezer, go right ahead and place that in right away because that's probably going to be your best option. Now I'm moving on to my chocolate cake pops, and this is mixed in with a little bit of marbled cake as well. And then I'm adding in a generous dose of dark chocolate ganache. Now I find with ganache, I don't get that oil leaking problem. So if you are a little bit nervous about that or have had issues with that in the past, I definitely recommend that you use a ganache. Just quickly revisiting on how I mentioned earlier that there is no particular recipe for cake pops because it depends on the type of cake that you're using. These chocolate cake pops turn out very differently and feel very differently than the vanilla ones. All right, so what I did was I placed everything in the freezer that I possibly could. So all of the Cakesicles, the heart mold ones, those all went into the freezer for a little bit first. Everything else stayed in the fridge. So everything that I could fit into the freezer, I did put in the freezer. Then once those things are frozen, you can easily stack anything on top, and it's not going to wreck the integrity of the shape at all. Also, in my live on Instagram today, where I finished up making some of these Cakesicles and the cake pops, some of you talked about how you had difficulty removing the Cakesicle. I like to do it this way instead of placing the chocolate in first and then placing it in. I personally just find it a lot easier to dip once it's nice and solid instead of putting the chocolate and painting it in like that. Although I will say if you do it that way, you get a really nice shiny chocolate. All right, so as you saw there, I just kind of chucked in all of the rest of the cake pops. Those are fairly frozen except for the ones on top, so I know that all of that shape is going to be maintained and there's no need to put parchment in the middle. So in terms of actually decorating and dipping these cake pops, I'm going to do a follow-up video to show you how to actually dip frozen cake pops and ensure that these stay spherical. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!